Here.
Alderman Bevere,
Here.
Alderman Davalos,
Here.
Alderman Goodman,
Here.
Alderman Hoffman,
Here.
Alderman Weidner,
Here.
Alderman Wilson,
Here.
and Alderman Ashour is not here.
Thank you. Will everyone please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now's the time we set aside for citizens' comments. I don't believe we have anyone who's signed up, so we'll move on to official and staff members' comments, beginning with Mayor Brummel. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one thing tonight, I wanted to highlight one of our agenda items, item F6, which is a quarterly economic development activity report. It's nearly 5 pages long, consisting of 19 items that are somewhere in the hopper for development here in Warrenville. It includes 10 new business licenses since September of 2018. It indicates a robust vitality in our town. This is something that we've worked very hard to engender over the years, and it's pretty exciting to see all these potential things happening, some of which are right on the verge of happening, others are at their beginning. But stay tuned, a lot of good things are coming in 2019 for the city of Warrenville, a lot of development that we've been nurturing for a long time and hoping for and planning for is finally coming together. So again, exciting times in our little town.
Thank you. Anyone else? I just have a couple things. I wanted to recognize that the city's Facebook page has grown in followers, and they gave in this weekly report, they gave a top 5 of the most popular posts, and I noticed that the 59 speed limit being lowered was numero uno, so that was fantastic, and I think it serves as a good reminder that anyone who needs current information about the city can go to the city's Facebook page and gather information. And also, there's another section of the city's website called Just the Facts that people might choose as a valuable resource with individuals campaigning for elections that's coming up April 2nd. I know sometimes people are given varying degrees of accurate information, and so both those things are good. If someone comes to your door and you're not sure of what the facts are behind the issue they may be talking about, both those places, the city's Facebook page and the excuse me, the Just the Facts section of the website can offer critical and accurate information. So, and also, I wanted to mention that there's been a signage change at the corner of Route 59 and Batavia Road. This was compliments of the Streets Division of Public Works. They installed 2 new pedestrian safety signage signs on Batavia Road, which state turning vehicles yield to pedestrians. And I thank them. These signs are much more visible than the previous signs that were posted at that corner, and I think it'll make our city just a little more friendlier to pedestrians and bicyclists as a bike-friendly city. Now we'll start the, excuse me, I think Alderman Goodman, you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody who doesn't already know that there is a public groundbreaking tomorrow for the new Jefferson preschool. District 200 have the recent referendum, and the groundbreaking ceremony is tomorrow. It's open to the public at 2:45. They're asking people to park at the county fairgrounds, and there'll be shuttles going back and forth. So get there a little early and give yourself enough time to do that if you're interested in going to the groundbreaking, because it's going to be a great event. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And unless there's any comments from staff, we'll go ahead and begin the business of the meeting. This evening's first agenda item is consideration of adoption of the International Solar Energy Provisions and Appendix U. Chief Code Official Dale Engbertson will provide us with the details on this agenda item. Dale?
Thank you. Is this working? Got it? Okay. So what we got here is with the cost of energy going up, more and more citizens across the entire country are looking for alternative ways of providing electricity and heating for their homes. And one of the most probably environmental sound means of doing that is through solar energy. And with a lot of the incentives that the federal and state governments and some of the utility companies are giving, it's kind of a little bit more beneficial now than ever for residents to go out and put solar photovoltaic systems on their houses. And in fact, actually in the department, we're seeing an increase of permits here already on that. So what staff is recommending here is to try and make this a lot easier for our community to be able to understand what they need to do for their permits, what kind of documents they need, what codes they have to comply with. Based on the way we already have it set up, it's basically in about 7 different code books scattered throughout. This had consolidated the solar energy provisions. We consolidate all that information into one easy-to-find book. And in addition, it would also put in a few references or reference materials from the Solar Energy Corporation, Certification Corporation. This makes it a lot easier for our staff to work with designers and contractors installing this, so we're on the same page. We understand what we're looking at. They know what they're supposed to submit to us. One of the things that's in this proposal that we do not have currently adopted is what's called Appendix U. Appendix U is intended to kind of encourage builders when they're building a house, having it oriented between the roof surface between 110 and 270 degrees of true north. This is the optimal area for solar energy to be pulled from the sun. But in addition to that, you also want to be able to get that power from the roof down to the electric panel in the house so you can tie it in with the existing system. It can be done, and most houses right now, of course, are being retrofitted with the solar panels and getting the power submitted down there. But it comes at a bit more cost, and staff had contacted a few contractors and determined that it would be costing an additional $100 to $200 on a house to have the house set up initially while it's under construction. This, of course, would only be for or pertain to new construction houses. And at that, just single-family and two-family houses. It won't be for apartment buildings or commercial. It's required on it. In the process of this, by putting this in, the builder has to look at it and come up with the calculations that assure the roof is going to be able to support the solar array panels, and also to pipe the mechanicals of the house. So in other words, basically the ventilation for sewer and chimneys, so that they're not going to be covered over by a solar array panel put in the future. In addition to that too, also as well, it'd be providing a chaseway for a conduit for the wires to go through and on the inside of the house rather than on the outside of the house. So that's, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we're looking at. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
Alderman Davalos.
Thank you. I thought at first you said this was a suggestion, but as I read the packet, it's a requirement. It's going to be a requirement as opposed to a suggested to developers or people building homes.
Yeah, well, when I say suggestive, builders could still try to arrange a house on a lot if they so desired, or trying to get around not putting this in for it to save $100 by orienting the roof outside of that 110 to 270 degrees. You know, and it's not always necessary to try and even get around it. I mean, if a roof is, got a gable end to it, that gable end might be on the front of the house, and the house might be oriented 90 degrees to that 110 to 270. So it wouldn't require the builder to redesign the house or reorient the house on that lot. That would be at the discretion of the builder.
Thank you.
Alderman Goodman?
So there was no memo about this in the packet, and the summary that is in our packet, the agenda summary, does not include the budgetary impact line item. So am I to assume that you left that out accidentally, or that there was no budgetary impact, and that's your way of saying it should be zero? What is it?
The budgetary impact to the city?
Because it
It would be
says
for the-
other resources required, $80, but it doesn't say, normally in our summary, there's a committee action requested, then there's a staff recommendation, then there's a budgetary impact, then there's resources required, and then there's the connection to the strategic plan. And this one left off the budget. So I'm just asking.
Do you want to?
I can speak to that because I was working with the administrative assistants to put this together, and I think what happened is other resources required was there's really no other resources required from the city's perspective, and the $80 should have been assigned or attached to the budgetary impact.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. So I guess my only question then is why only single-family homes, townhomes, and not apartment buildings? It seems like in terms of having at least 600 square feet, then larger buildings would clearly meet that standard much more often.
Well, yeah, generally, and not always the case, but most apartment buildings, end up with a flat roof. So that flat roof becomes a whole different, and the whole logistics of running electric and commercial or multifamily building like that is going to be significantly different. We definitely would be encouraging any developer to put in a solar array system on top of even a flat roof like that. In fact, more so because there's much more space up there to do it, and it's not as visible from the street typically on a 3-story building.
So do we have any sort of ordinance revision that would need to take place in order to help us encourage people to do that?
I think that's something that staff would have to look at a little bit closer. And, it goes into design perimeters too, how to set up a system. And like I say, it can definitely be done, I'm sure. But that's a little bit outside the purview of the current staff that we have.
Right, but the purpose of doing this is to adopt provisions that make us a more solar-friendly community and to encourage people, even if they aren't going to install solar, to encourage people to at least consider doing it and make it solar-ready for later owners of buildings. So if we're doing it in one case, my question is just, why not consider the policy change in a more blanket way to make it uniform, even-handed application of the law is a good thing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I'd like to see it on every building, really. It's just a matter of how to design that out. And that's, like I said, I'm not a designer, so I don't understand what's all involved with that. Typically, in a multifamily building, you have several panels, so it's a matter of how you're going to distribute that out. And it gets into electrical engineering, of course, at that point. Right. Ron brought to my attention that this Appendix U just pertains to 1 and 2 family dwellings. Now, the rest of the book also provides provisions in there for, of course, for commercial use too. In fact, it's divided up into 2 sections in here, commercial being, of course, anything of business, industrial, or multifamily typically, and then the segment of residential, which is typically 1 and 2 family attached homes.
So there are provisions in the broader,
Yes, in the broader scope of
International
things,
solar
yeah.
energy.
It's just the Appendix U is just taking trying to encourage builders because a homeowner buying into a new house may not have the resources initially to set up a solar array system on their house. But would like to do it, of course, and like I say, as the cost of solar array panels go down, more and more people are going to be seeking those opportunities of getting essentially free power from the sun.
Sure, and we're not mandating any solar power. We're mandating buildings that will accommodate future solar installations. That's not the same thing at all. And I'm not asking about adopting a policy that would mandate solar power on other buildings. I'm just talking about whether anything in this also encourages solar power on other buildings, or if there's other standards we should consider adopting that would.
Right, and I'm not aware of any other standards that set up, a commercial building other than what's in here already, but those standards that are in this book are to make the building safe in doing it, whereas Appendix U is just kind of a tool for helping the homeowners in the future. Commercial buildings typically also have a little bit more resources to retrofit a building later on as well.
Okay, well, thank you.
Sure.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes, I just have a question, because it also includes townhouses as well as the 1 and 2 family. So you're talking about a square foot area for the roof, but when the townhouse, I live in a townhouse that has few skylights in it. I don't know if this distracts from the 600 available square footage. Does that interfere with it? And also the weight of the panels, do we have any weight limits, or are all houses built able to accommodate the weight of these solar panels?
Well, with the, if you have an existing house, and again, that Appendix U is for new house construction, okay? But if you were trying to put panels on an existing, you have a skylight in there, you got to make a decision at that point. Either the solar array panel is going to cover over the skylight, which renders the skylight essentially useless, or cut around the skylight, which doesn't always work that very well with solar array panels since they come in a standard sizing. As far as for the weight goes on a house, my understanding is that most of these solar array panels are roughly the same weight equivalent of putting on another shingling roof. So in roof construction, typically you're allowed up to 2 layers of roofing on your house. Most solar array installers will take a look at the house, an existing house, and if they see that there's an old roof on it or a roof that has 2 layers on it, they're going to encourage you to get the roof changed out, which is not always covered by the grants or anything. The grants are typically just for the solar array panels.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Alderman Goodman?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council adopt the 2015 International Solar Energy Provisions as well as its Appendix U.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Before we leave this topic, I'd just like to offer congratulations to the Chief Code Official, Mr. Engbranson, for your special award that you received from the suburban building officials at their annual conference. Evidently, you contributed quite amount of exemplary service and professional contributions to that organization, so our congratulations to you. Thank you. Our next item is consideration of the Illinois Department of Transportation Local Agency Agreement for the construction of Deal Road Added Turn Lanes project. And Senior Civil Engineer Christine Hocking will provide us with the details on this topic. Christine?
Thank you very much. The Deal Road Added Turn Lanes project received a surface transportation program funding commitment for 70%. It says 75%. That was an error on my part. For 70% of the construction costs. So the 30% local share of construction costs actually is going to be split 50-50 between DUDOT and the city. We signed an IGA at the end of last year regarding that commitment and funding between the two entities. This local agency agreement that's included in the backup materials is typical for a IDOT project that includes federal funding. They want to ensure that the city is committed to providing the funding for the local share. This project will be on the IDOT letting program, and the bids will be read on April 26th. So it's in the IDOT hopper. So it will be probably starting construction in June. So with that, if there's any questions regarding the LAA or the funding commitment or the dollar amounts, the total cost sharing federal dollars is $214,193, and then the local funds is $127,164, and the local funds cover the construction local costs as well as construction engineering local costs. The construction engineering is 100% paid by the city, split with DUDOT 50-50.
Questions? Alderman Goodman.
Thank you. So DuPage County is not a party to this agreement, but because we have a separate agreement with them, we're going to pay our share and they're eventually going to reimburse us.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
So none of the documentation here is being reviewed by them or approved by them or needs to be signed by them. We're just gonna, send them copies so that they have it?
Yes.
And are they familiar with all these numbers and they've okayed them?
They are familiar with all of the numbers for the previous phases. We estimated the cost of construction when we signed the IGA, and at that time, we were estimating it to be, I believe, approximately $600,000. So they were willing to pay up to, so the construction engineering would be 60%, or sorry, 10% usually of that. So they were willing to pay 50% of those costs when the construction costs were a lot higher than what they actually are going to be. Have they seen these exact numbers? No, not yet.
Okay, I mean, I notice in the LAA, it says that there's a maximum STU participating construction not to exceed 70% or 525,000, so maybe that was the original estimate.
That was the original estimate when we applied for the grant. It was actually, the construction costs were $750,000. So 70% of that is $525,000. So that's why that's in there. It's they always have to put the not to exceed. Usually it's not that much different than what the actual costs are, but in this case it's quite different. But they want to document that
Okay, yeah,
regardless.
that's why it caught my eye, just because it was a lot different.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, that's clear.
Alderman Davalos.
Thank you. This is just a little logistics question. So you talk about a start of perhaps June of 19. Any estimate at all on how long this is going to take? Because I'm assuming that side of Deal is going to be shut down and they'll redirect traffic, I mean, on the other side or whatever. I'm just wondering, I'm sure that we will communicate that everywhere we can communicate it, but any estimate, or is that kind of?
They have approximately 26 working days in the contract, so
Okay,
that's
it's not bad.
a month and a half if there's good weather, essentially. So we have also been in contact with Target because there is some work that Target actually has to do on their side of the property for this project, but we will be letting everyone know. The construction phasing will be, it would only shut down one lane going in each direction, so the Deal Road won't be completely shut down or traffic won't have to be rerouted, it'll just be reduced.
Thank you.
City Administrator.
I do want to clarify one thing. You said everything absolutely accurately, Christine, but for the public, and I have to translate this every time I hear it, 26 construction working days, I think those are the right terms, under the state contracts, that doesn't include weekends or holidays or if they have rain-out days. So
Correct.
26 days, that sounds, oh, that's just about
Sounds
less than a
short,
month.
but-
That's great. It could last for quite a while. I think
Correct.
they had 50 working days for our project out on Butterfield here, the city improvements, and
Right.
they're just finishing it now. So it can be spread over a lengthy period of time with that construction area closed down. It's a necessary project, and, you know, we've all seen many, many, many projects, we work around them, but 26 days is not 26 calendar days.
Correct.
Thank you.
It is also weather-dependent and strike-dependent, too, which in the past, we sometimes have strikes by construction road workers, and we could have a very wet season, so we hope for 26 working days.
Right.
Okay, are there any other questions, comments? If not, Alderman Goodman?
I would like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council pass a resolution approving the local agency agreement for federal participation for the Deal Road Added Turn Lanes project, which involves the cost sharing of $214,193 in federal funds and $127,164 in local, not just Warrenville funds.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hocking. Our third item this evening is consideration of construction engineering agreement with James J. Bennis and Associates Incorporated for Deal Road Added Turn Lanes project. And again, Christine Hocking will provide us with the information we need on this topic. Christine?
Thank you. As described in the previous agenda item, the construction engineering costs would be paid 100% with local funds. This allows the city to follow its qualifications-based selection service process to choose an engineering firm. We sent out the RFP to 4 engineering firms, and one firm submitted a proposal, and that was from James J. Bennis and Associates. Bennis did the preliminary and final engineering for this project, and so they're very familiar with the project. The scope of the project would be construction observation, documenting per IDOT requirements, materials testing, and coordination with their subconsultant. The proposal is for $35,367. We feel that this is a reasonable amount, considering the construction costs and the amount of working days. So I would like to recommend that City Council pass a resolution approving the Bennis contract.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Alderman Goodman?
I thought this contract was very interesting, especially the new section about city data and trade secrets. It says that they would supply the city with any and all information that might be developed based on our city data at our request. So that seems interesting and somewhat new. Do you think we'll make such a request, or do we think it's likely they would find out anything interesting about our data?
No, this is a standard city form that the city attorney has put together. We've been using for various engineering contracts. I think that's more dealing with, like if they were going to use typically like GIS and use it, add in more information, we could potentially take that information and incorporate it into our own GIS system.
Well, that sounds worthwhile. I don't know if it would be very significant in this case, but you never know. So you know, it always seems worthwhile to make such a request if we have the right to. It just seemed like an interesting part of the contract, with the new city attorney being very cognizant of all these relevant issues in a very new and modern way, which I appreciate a great deal. I think she does an excellent job. So I'd like to make a motion to recommend that the City Council pass a resolution approving the contract with James J. Bennis and Associates Incorporated for the construction engineering of the Deal Road Added Turn Lanes project in the amount of $35,367.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I just wanted to ask Ms. Hocking, this, I assume and am aware that the city has worked with the Bennis Corporation very successfully in the past on several different projects. Is that correct?
Yes, the
And-
city has.
And they usually fall within budget?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Our next item is the consideration of the Economic Development Representative's recommendation on responses to the Southwest District Redevelopment Site Number 1 request for proposals. And Community and Economic Development Director Ron Menser will provide us with the details on this agenda item. Ron?
Thank you. What I'd like to do is begin by providing just a brief background on the city's involvement with the northeast corner of Route 59, Route 56, what the city's goals are for that area of the community, where we're at in our efforts to achieve those goals, and the Economic Development Representatives Group recommendations for moving forward towards achieving those goals. For the last 20-plus years, the city has owned the 3 parcels of vacant property right at the corner of Route 59, Route 56. Together, that's just over an acre of property. During that entire period of time, whenever the opportunity afforded it to the city was attempting to work with the owners of the adjacent vacant properties to the north and to the east, and any developer that we felt was interested and qualified in potentially redeveloping those properties, with the end goal of trying to facilitate the assemblage and quality commercial development of those properties in a coordinated manner. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, we were never successful in our attempts to have the private sector and the private properties work together to assemble and redevelop those properties. However, a few years back, the city had the opportunity to work with the owners of the vacant properties north and east of the city's property. In total, there were 2 different owners that owned 10 different parcels of land. Ultimately, the city was able to purchase those parcels of land from those owners at below market value at the time. So we were able to assemble all those properties with the, again, long-term goal of facilitating a quality commercial redevelopment of those properties in a coordinated manner. Which kind of brings me up to current day. Last October, the City Council discussed and ultimately authorized city staff to prepare a request for proposals for the potential sale and redevelopment of what we now call Southwest District Redevelopment Site Number 1. That's 13 acres of property, all vacant at the northeast corner, 13 parcels in total, 7.25 acres. We produced that request for proposals. The City Council reviewed that, authorized us to distribute that to the private sector. It was posted on the city's website, published in the newspaper, and sent directly to 12 different real estate development firms and real estate brokerage firms that are active in the commercial real estate market in the DuPage County area. At the end of last year, we had received 2 proposals back from that effort. A copy of each of those proposals are included in the agenda backup materials for this particular agenda item. They're attached as exhibits to the memo that was included in the agenda backup material. The first proposal, which is illustrated graphically on the display screen, was submitted by a group of 3 different commercial developers that were proposing to team up and acquire the city's property and redevelop it in fairly short order in what I would describe as more of a traditional, somewhat unimaginative highway commercial type development. Something that would be, you'd be used to seeing up and down the Route 59 corridor in the commercial areas. Most likely, their proposal would have involved the construction of a daycare facility, some quick serve fast food restaurant with drive-through facilities, a retail facility, maybe like an auto parts store, and a, hopefully, ideally, some type of sit-down restaurant facility. An interesting component of their proposal, if you had a chance to look at it in any detail, was that they were anticipating that they would acquire the property for free from the city of Warrenville in exchange for their construction of whatever roadway improvements on 56 and 59 that would be necessary to serve the property, and the extension of whatever city sewer and water utilities that would need to be brought to the property to service the proposed development. The second proposal was submitted by Able Properties LLC, we commonly know that entity as the Two Brothers Brewing Company. And their proposal involves not just the city's property, but connecting the city's property with and developing the city's property as a package in a much larger in conjunction with a much larger corporate complex that they are envisioning moving forward with on the 20 acres of property that they have already purchased at the northwest corner of the Route 59, Route 56 intersection. As you can see by the graphic illustration that's on display and was attached to their proposal, they have a fairly aggressive and creative development program for the property that they currently own and control. It involves building a state-of-the-art corporate campus that would include a new brewery facility, distilled spirits facility, coffee roasting facility, a new banquet facility, a new full-service Two Brothers restaurant, and corporate office facilities, along with some distribution components for their business units. In addition, they don't need the full 20 acres for their business units, so they're looking to create some outlot developments for other uses, restaurant, commercial, and hospitality hotel uses that would be complementary to their corporate campus project. In total, their side of the street, probably you're looking at about $80 million or so of private investment and development, and they are looking to control the city's property and develop the city's property as kind of the second phase of this overall master plan for both sides of the road. Once they move forward with their project and it's underway, it's more likely that the east side of the street would be more attractive to the type of uses that not only I think the city and the community would like to see on our property, but also the uses that would be complementary again to the larger corporate complex that they're looking to move forward on their project or on their property. So the economic development representatives met right after the New Year's holiday to review the two proposals and develop the recommendations that are being presented tonight. From the review of the proposals and comparing those proposals to the various policy documents that the City Council has adopted for and applied to the Southwest District area of the community over the last 4 or 5 years, the Economic Development Group concluded unanimously that the Two Brothers proposal by far is most consistent with and best aligned with the goals and objectives that are outlined in the city's long-term policy and planning documents, number one. And number two, that even though the development of our property would be probably a little further down the road under this concept and this proposal than what's anticipated under the prior group's proposal, long-term, this package of development would more than likely generate a much better long-term fiscal return for the community, as opposed to kind of the standard strip highway commercial development that was illustrated on the previous proposal. For those reasons, the Economic Development representatives are recommending 3 things of the City Council going forward on this. First, to identify or designate the Two Brothers Group as the preferred purchaser and developer of the city's redevelopment site. We reference that site now as Southwest District Redevelopment Site Number 1, or SDRS Number 1. The second item we're recommending the council do is to authorize the Two Brothers Group to move forward and present their concept development plan for not just the property that they currently own and control, but also for the city's property on the opposite side of Route 59 to the Plan Commission at an upcoming courtesy review process. And then finally, authorize city staff and the city's redevelopment attorney to begin negotiations with the Two Brothers Group on a redevelopment agreement. We did outline in the agenda backup materials, it's actually Exhibit D, the specific some specific important terms that the economic development representatives feel need to be incorporated into the negotiation of the redevelopment agreement. And I'm just going to run through those really quickly. This is a summary of them. In general, the economic development representatives were not uncomfortable and not opposed to the general terms that were included in the Two Brothers proposal, so we were good with working with them as a basis for the negotiations. However, we do see the agreement ultimately being structured somewhat in the form of a option agreement that would basically hold the transfer of the city's property to a point in time when the Two Brothers group had satisfied very specific performance criteria. Performance criteria meaning we'd like to see them meet certain milestones on moving forward with their project, applications for their project, permits for their project, and construction of their project. And once they met some predetermined thresholds, then they would have the ability to acquire the city's property. A concern is that we would want to make sure that the city was made whole for the legal costs that would be incurred to negotiate this type of agreement, especially in the case if for some reason the Two Brothers decided not to move forward with their project and not to buy our property down the road. We wanted to make sure that the city didn't spend $20,000 on negotiating agreement that wasn't going to be executed or used. We also are concerned that at some point in time in the future, there's a potential need to reset the value of the city's property that we might be selling it for. If it takes a long time for the Two Brothers to move forward and satisfy those milestones and close on the city's property, and if it's extended pretty far out into the future, we want to have the ability to renegotiate the purchase price in some form or another. We need to negotiate those details, of course. And then a couple of kind of other more obvious things is that we'd like to definitely make sure that the redevelopment agreement talked about what the design criteria and expectations would be for the development of these projects, the type of building materials, the building orientation, to ensure that it's a quality project that's representative of kind of this creative design that's illustrated in the concept plan and would make an attractive entrance into the city for motorists traveling from either the south or from the west. We'd certainly want to restrict certain types of land uses that maybe aren't so desirable from the city's perspective from occurring on the city's property. We'd like to make sure that the Two Brothers are committed to evaluating the economic feasibility and benefits of potentially incorporating solar arrays into this project, solar energy production. And then there's some specific trail and decorative streetlight improvements that are identified in the city's policy documents and plans for this area that we want to make sure that get done if the city's project happens, is redeveloped. So that's kind of a summary of the economic development group's recommendation to the city council. I know Jim and Jason Abel, the owners of Two Brothers, are here along with the developer that has been working with them and the city staff for the better part of 2 or 3 years now to get to this point with their project. And I believe that they would be available to answer any questions as well as I am.
Thank you, Ron. And again, we do have two guests with us tonight, the owner, Mr. Jason Abel of Two Brothers, and along with him, the project development director, Mr. Jim Hughes. Would either you, and Jim Abel. Sorry, I didn't recognize you right away. It's the installation. Thank you for joining us all, and if any of you or all of you would like to address the group before we go into questions and comments, we'd appreciate hearing from you.
Again, my name is Jim Hughes. I'm with Next Generation Development. We're a Wheaton-based developer, so we're just a couple minutes down the road. We've had the distinct pleasure of working with Jim and Jason and their dad as well, who was part of Able Properties LLC. We've been working on this for about a year, and I'm not an attorney, I'm just a developer. My mom's an attorney, my dad's an attorney, a brother-in-law's an attorney, and a sister who thinks she's an attorney. So I am not in any way, shape, or form an attorney. I want to make that very clear. We do a lot of development work in the area. I'm doing a big project down at the Route 59 train station, 460 multi-story luxury high-end apartments. We are thrilled to be working with these guys and working with Ron, who I can't tell you, as much as I've been doing this and as long as I've been doing this, he's a delight to do business with. You guys should give him a raise. How's that, Ron? Did I do it? I'm here to answer any questions. Jim and Jason are available to answer any questions. What we're looking for, hopefully, tonight is to get an approval from you to move forward to full committee to get the RFP approved and let us really dig in. We've been working on this for a year plus, and we're ready to go. I want to bring some architects in and get some of the real fun stuff going here sooner rather than later. So I'm here for questions relative to that. They're here, except for recipes for any of the beers or the coffee. I don't think they'll give that up, but whatever else there is, by all means, please let us know, let me know, whatever. Okay?
Are there any questions from the council? Alderman Goodman?
So one of the things that Ron talked about was how you don't necessarily need the whole 20 acres for your headquarters and have development and outlots anticipated as
Right.
part of the original project. So I guess my question would be, as this new piece is added, how do you envision that being structured? Are you going to build to suit? Are you going to sell off these parcels individually? Are you going to rent?
The first step is going to be establish the destination point that we feel very strongly that this project will bring to Warrenville, to DuPage County. We only feel that by the development of the west side and all that's going to go with that, from the brewery campus to the offices to the hotel to everything else we're doing, that will just increase opportunities to happen on the east side. Right now, retail is a tough business.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's not. So we have to get unique uses on both the west side and the east side. Some things like a boutique grocery store, a couple other things like that that we're trying to look into. So we want to get the foothold done on the west side, get that established, get that up, get that going, and then move to the east side with uses we may not see right today, but we may see in a year, we may see in 2 years. With the corridor of Route 59 happening, the amount of residential that's coming in on that corridor, from all the way from what I'm doing down at the Route 59 train station, all the way up to what's going on up here, there's a lot of residential people coming to the area, which is a good thing, especially for what we're doing here. And that will only enhance kind of the value of what's going on and where we can go to the east.
So do you anticipate being the builder then on the east side as well?
At this point, absolutely.
Okay, so-
And that was, if I may, that was the whole point with Jim and Jason when we were going through this. And we finally kind of got to the finish line on the west side. And then the thought came up, well, why don't we try and tie up the east side so there can be a continuity to what's going on. There can be a balance. It'll look kind of the same. We're going to try and theme this a little bit. So at this point, absolutely, unless somebody comes by and wants to offer them a whole chunk of change, at this point, yes, we want to, that's going to be part of what we develop.
Okay. My second question is more for Ron. One of the things we've got here in the redevelopment agreement expectations page on Exhibit D has to do with the specific commercial land uses that you said were less than desirable. My one question had to do with the not-for-profits being listed there. I mean, obviously, we don't necessarily want people who aren't going to be paying taxes, but I know that, having read quite a lot about your company, you do a lot of charitable work, and you have not-for-profit aspects to your business, donations of various things that are documented in the materials that we have here, and also that I'm familiar with from your business. So how can we draft this appropriately to allow for, reasonable not-for-profit use in certain contexts and not cut that off?
What I would envision is that we would ultimately establish a list of general land uses that would, when I say prohibit, not allowed, they would be not allowed without some additional special approval authorization from the city council. So, I mean, the city would always have the ability on a case-by-case basis to say, hey, we're willing to give some adjustment to the restriction that we established as part of the land sales contract for this agreement to accommodate something that the community felt was, the city council felt would be appropriate and desirable for the community at that location. So that's how I envision that we would do that.
Right, but I mean, if we're expecting them to set up their corporate headquarters here and they, spin off a charitable branch or something, I think that's a good thing. Okay, so we'll just keep that in mind when negotiating that particular language of this agreement. Thank you.
Is that like free beers on Tuesday or something like that?
Free beer tomorrow. Alderman Hoffman?
Yeah, I was just wondering, as far as the land purchase agreement, I'm really not in favor of selling that land. I'd like to see a land lease on it. And it could possibly help you out as far as not have to have so much money to come up front with. Maybe the city could have some kind of agreement where we wrote you a lease and you paid so much, like a first right to refusal type situation, where you could know that property is available to you, but pay so much every year until you need to use it. And then the land agreement, the land lease would kick in on it. And like a lot of these malls have outlots, or you're gonna have outlots that you're probably gonna lease out, you're not gonna sell them. Basically, the city would lease you that land.
And that's something I would like to, discuss with them. That hadn't been part of the conversations until you just brought it up, but I'd certainly would be willing to have that conversation and keep that in mind with, moving forward with staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. Wow. This is pretty exciting, actually.
Yes,
It's
it's
pretty
very
exciting. And a lot of us are very excited to just look at this and think of the potential.
As are these two guys behind me.
Good. That's great. I don't know if this question is for Ron, or I'm concerned about the access. It seems, and I'm sure this has been discussed already, that, we run into a lot of properties that end up being right in, right out all the time, and that's very frustrating for businesses a lot of the time. And we have been able to get intersections built quite quickly if there's a need, but not always. So I see here that, I'm wondering, this east side, how dependent is it to this full access light here that's up at the north end of the properties? I know it's not there now, and then everything else seems to be right in and right out except over on the west side of the west property. Looks like potentially, maybe someone's discussed this, looks like it's more than a right in, right out. So is this going to be a big problem? Is this going to stop this whole thing, do you think, or does anybody know?
Access into this, both sides of Route 59 and off of Butterfield Road for this project collectively is definitely a challenging issue. It involves IDOT. Both of these roads are designated as what's called a strategic regional arterial in IDOT's hierarchy of road system. And strategic regional arterials are the ones that are most controlled and access is restricted to the greatest degree from IDOT's perspective. We've had a number of meetings with IDOT about access to these properties over the last couple of years. We've engaged the services of a traffic engineering consultant to help with those conversations and evaluate what would be feasible and how we could try to meet the intent of certain design criteria that IDOT has. But I can tell you, and we've had, I don't know how many meetings we've had about the same issue. I can tell you that it is a work in progress, and there is no certainties on what access will look like for these properties at this point in time. As much as we've done to try to proactively set the table for reasonable and desirable access, it's IDOT, and IDOT is very unwilling to make any formal commitments until they have a very detailed project, a formal application for that project, and they can evaluate all of the aspects of those design documents to see what type of access has been, would be appropriate and justified. I can tell you part of the discussions that we've had internally at the city with our engineering consultant and with the Two Brothers and some of the surrounding property owners is whether or not some additional property assemblage would be appropriate, and if additional properties were added to the mix, you might say, whether or not that would increase the ability to obtain the most desirable access for the properties possible. So those conversations, I'm sure will continue as we go forward and try to work together with Two Brothers to find the path to make all this happen.
Thank you. It just seems there's a lot of commercial potentially here on both sides. And boy, without some kind of full intersection, well, it'd be tough, as everybody knows. So anyway, thank you for explaining where we are now.
I may just add one thing to it. There's access issues on 59 and 56. We've made a lot more progress on the Route 56 access with IDOT because they've seen detailed final plans for the Lexington Trace project, which incorporates the city's long-term plan to extend Barclay Avenue south of Route 56. So they are much more in alignment with the city's goals of having that intersection signalized, which would be a benefit not just to the projects that happen to the south, but also the Two Brothers property and access into the rest of the industrial park for that matter, if it could all happen off of a new signalized intersection. Once there's enough traffic from all the development that's being proposed in the south section of Barclay Avenue is connected to Butterfield Road. So, all these pieces that we've been planning and talking about for the last 4 or 5 years with our sub-area plan, our economic development plan, and our TIF4 redevelopment plan, they have all been considered as we have worked forward and through the various discussions that we've had with Two Brothers to date.
And we did have what I would consider, we were at IDOT for 2.5 hours here about 9-10 months ago. That was the best meeting I've ever had with IDOT, I think, as long as I've been doing this. And the concept is, at least at this point, is a 3/4 access at the north point of Two Brothers property at this point. With, if we can bring another piece of property in, we can maybe get a full access there. But very candidly, that was a battle just to get the 3/4, which they conceptually agreed to, subject to all of their little checkpoints that they go through, from traffic counts to ticker tapes to whatever else they come up with to put this all together. But again, that was the best meeting I've had with IDOT in years.
Thank you.
Alderman Goodman?
Yeah, I just sort of want to make a general comment, which is that I've been on the city council 8 years and on the plan commission for 6 years before that, and there's no business that's come before me with expansion plans for me to review more often than yours in that stretch of time. And I've watched your growth with a lot of enthusiasm and pride, and seeing a local company do as well as yours is great. So we want to support our local businesses and see them grow and stay here in Warrenville. And so that's why this project is very exciting for me personally. I do want to express some disagreement with the plan put forward by Alderman Hoffman about possibly making this a lease, though. I don't think that the city is generally in the landlord business, and taking on liability by being a landlord isn't something I think the city should be interested in doing. So that's just my 2 cents on that project. I understand that it would decrease your risk on the project, but I don't think it's a good idea. That's just my personal opinion. Thank you.
And I believe the mayor wants to say something, but before he does, I think I have a long-winded question I wanted to ask you. As a council, we're constantly challenged to, develop a community that's, vibrant, healthy, diverse, and has all these different ingredients. And during the past couple of years, the City of Warrenville planning professionals and members of the Planning Council have concentrating on adding a diverse array of housing stock, apartments, townhouses, and single-family homes. And, I guess one of my question is, does this type of development bode well for what the other side of the coin is doing? Because kind of we see it as puzzle pieces fitting together and helping to establish what we're all desiring. And, many of our citizens in the surveys are asking for coffee shops, restaurants, and community gathering places where they can have these community conversations. And I just wonder, from your professional opinion, how does this does one make the other viable?
One works very well for the other. There's an old adage that used to be, build the rooftops and the commercial will come. Well, in this case, we're kind of going somewhat backwards, but we're building this first in anticipation of the rooftops coming. And all those rooftops, as I said, I can go from the Route 59 train station apartments to this site in 7.5 minutes if I can get through that mess over Route 88 that I still haven't figured out. So just to that point, the iconic destination point draw that this development will be, not only for Warrenville, but for DuPage County and for the state of Illinois. I mean, this is going to be a very, very cool deal. And I look forward to, presenting more stuff that you can see and get your hands around and get your arms around. And yes, there will be a coffee shop. It won't be a Starbucks. I was already told that by Jason. There will be a coffee shop. There will be no Starbucks.
There's enough.
Yeah,
Thank you.
there is. But yes, it's an iconic destination point that I think will be a huge draw. Vice versa, you can bet those people in those apartments and those townhomes, you can bet that this will be promoted in part of those marketing packages for those people. Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate that comment. Mayor?
Thank you. First of all, the proposal as presented tonight makes perfect sense to me, so I'm in full support of it, and I hope it moves forward.
Thank you.
In the past few years, I think the single most asked question to me has been, how are Two Brothers doing? Always interested in when these guys are going to get this project going. So the community excitement for this particular project is pretty high. The anticipation is wild out there. They want to see it. They want to be able to go there. From my personal point of view, it'd be nice to meet with mayors and not have them ask me what's going on with Two Brothers with an eye of trying to steal you from our So as soon as you can move some dirt, I'd be happy, because then I can tell them, hey, sorry, they're staying for sure. So I'm pretty excited at the prospect. Clearly, there is a connection between the residential projects that we have going in the Southwest District. That's one of the first pieces of the puzzle that will help you folks and help other commercial development. So we have the Everton project, we have the across the street, the Lexington project. These are all quality projects. I can only imagine that when they're built and you're built, people are going to walk down the paths and they're going to be going to your place. So this is kind of a symbiosis type thing where both of what things are happening, the residential and this, are going to be the catalyst for that entire area. And you guys getting in on the ground floor is going to be good for you. It's going to be good for the community. It helps us get something started, and it also adds value to your project over a period of time. So we're delighted that you're here. It's, as Alderman Goodman said, it's really been exciting to watch you over the few years that you've grown, and some of us have kind of regretted that we didn't get on board your operation earlier, but
I don't know if you've ever been to their offices and tried to get upstairs. It's like running a gauntlet. So they need to get to bigger space.
Yeah.
And they need the ability to do that and expand in all the and they're so brand conscious, and it's such a brand entity that resonates with people, and the opportunity to plunk this right on that corner and all the cool things that come with it. Just the hotel and that kind of stuff. It's just all very, very cool, and we look forward to working with staff, Ron and his group, and everybody else, and coming back and hopefully getting a full vote, and onwards we go.
get it done.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Alderman Hoffman?
This is not a question, it's just, I travel around a little bit, and it always makes my heart smile when I see your beer out of state and see Two Brothers in that, so good luck.
Thank you.
Clerk Larson?
Thank you. I, like the mayor, belong to two clerk associations, DuPage County and a Northwestern Illinois one. And your fame goes all over the state, as you know, or beyond. And so I have been asked many times, what's Two Brothers going to do? Are they going to stay in Warrenville? So I am as excited as everybody else that I can finally get the shovel in the dirt and soil, and then I can tell them that you're staying in Warrenville. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, let's hurry up and make a motion. Someone. Alderman Goodman.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the City Council, 1, designate Able Properties LLC as the preferred purchaser and developer of Southwest District Redevelopment Site Number 1. 2, authorize Able Properties LLC to proceed with a Plan Commission courtesy review of their combined development proposal for the northwest and northeast corners of the Route 59, Route 56 intersection. And 3, direct staff and the city's redevelopment attorney to negotiate a land sales and redevelopment agreement with Able Properties LLC, which would incorporate and address the city's expectations outlined in Exhibit D attached to the Community and Economic Development Director Menser's memorandum dated January 9th, 2019.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Cheers, fellas.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Cheers, everybody. Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week, right?
That's right. Okay, moving on to item number 5 on this evening's agenda, discussion of the draft fiscal year 2020 citywide work plan, and City Administrator John Coakley will provide us with the details on this topic.
Thank you. This is more of a discussion item, as you may be aware, or will soon be. It is the budget preparation season in Warrenville. The staff is hard at work, working with the finance department to get everything in place, which will eventually be presented to the council. We'll start the departmental budget presentations in coming meetings coming up very soon. But this is part of, as we started last year, the citywide work plan is part of that whole process. And this is on the agenda tonight to make sure, we have a problem with that light switch. I guess the meeting's over, intermission or something. We'll get that fixed tomorrow. Anyway, this is will be on the agendas for all the committee meetings leading up to the budget workshop in mid-March. And of course, the council meetings, if there's a question, we'll be happy to entertain them, just to make sure that there's plenty of opportunities for the aldermen to ask questions. We have some of the staff here tonight. If you have a question about something that isn't pertinent to community development or administration, I'll make sure that you get the answers to those questions. So you'll see it on each agenda. We've gotten it down to at least a final draft. But again, if there's questions, comments, something we need to reconsider or look at, we want to have the opportunity to do so. So I'll entertain questions, and again, there's some other staff here too that we can help.
Alderman Goodman.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. First, the city website redesign has been moved up from Tier 3 to a Tier 1 initiative, and I noticed in the weekly report that there was already a meeting on this, but there was no alderman at that meeting. And I know that the last time we did a city website redesign, there was a committee which was formed, and I was the city council representative on that committee. Are we going to be doing that again this time, or was that just some sort of preliminary meeting? What went on?
I'm going to defer that to Christina because she's heading that up, filling if there's a need.
Yes, that was just a preliminary meeting. We have not made any official work groups yet. The purpose of that meeting was, one, to go over some content software that we've been using that's been helping us clean up broken links and information that, like misspellings and things that are coming up as red flags on the website for us. So it was more of a training on that, as well as an initial discussion about preparing for the upcoming redesign and getting everybody on board for looking at their content and making sure that they're considering what kind of information we need to have on the website and the design of it, but nothing official yet. We will be establishing a work group. We haven't decided yet what that's going to look like and what kind of focus groups and how many members and all of that has yet to be determined.
Okay, I've gotten a lot of public feedback about the city website, and I know that I'm not alone and that other aldermen are hearing this too. I've discussed it with some other aldermen who've gotten feedback about how confusing and Byzantine our website is, and so I would like to encourage you to get public input in this process so that we can improve the situation and make our information more accessible.
Absolutely. And any feedback you receive, please feel free to share that with me or direct those questions or comments to me directly. I'd be happy to speak to anybody as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second question had to do with the citywide facilities study that's been moved up from Tier 3 to Tier 2. I know Tier 2 projects don't necessarily all happen, but that sounds like a pretty urgent one that we've put off for a while. Is that likely to happen this year? Just because it's Tier 2, does that mean it will, or maybe, or if we get time?
It should happen this year. The reason it's a Tier 2 is needs to be preceded by the services and staffing study. And in my mind, in our mind as staff, that needs to be done to determine if we have the right amount of services, the right level of services, too many, too little, right size their services, and then what staffing is needed to provide those services now and going forward. Once you have that determined, then we can work with a separate group to do a separate study on the space needs. What type of remodeling might be needed are there additions needed to buildings? Do we have the right amount of space? Just reallocate the space. But we can't do that. We don't want to do the space needs study before we know what it is we're trying to accommodate.
But it just seems like these two things need to be done sort of in conjunction. Because maybe I'm thinking about it too much.
I would just say they need to be done in tandem, so they should be done close together. It would be wonderful to have both results already, so we could be moving on the implementation of whatever those studies results come forward. But we know that all of the staff is going to be involved in this, plus others to get to the end results. There's been a lot of things on their plates, but the other item that I wanted to wait for is to find out, is development going to actually happen? We have a lot of things moving through a process. Is there going to be more commercial, residential? Many things have preliminary approvals. A few have final approvals. We know there's going to be a Thornton's gas station, pending their building permits. That in and of itself wouldn't require a lot of staff, but some of these others may. And it'll give us, by May, we'll have a much clearer idea, are these places breaking ground? Are they actually coming? Or not all developments actually happen. So several of those things, but again, if we know, the first and longest part of it should be the services and staffing study. The services is a more nebulous concept. We need council input, community input to find out what is it that Warrenville should be offering and how are we doing with what we're offering. Should they be higher level, lower level, et cetera? And then we can determine the staffing. It's somewhat of a formula. If you're going to do a higher level of public works and more public works services, then you're going to need more employees there, et cetera, police and so on. Then we can figure out exactly what we need for spacing. We know we have some needs now, but we want to make sure that we do that study once and it's good for 5 to 10, 15 years in the future. And if we're going to add on or make some recommendations for changing, we don't want to do that too often, and you don't want to add on and then find out it's not big enough kind of thing.
Okay, and then my last question has to do with the strategic plan. Because once again, establishing action items and measurable outcomes for the 2015 strategic plan goals has been moved down to Tier 3 and is not expected to happen in fiscal year 2020. So let me just point out again the 5-year difference between those two numbers.
We're debating which one of us is going to take that. For both. I'll start and you can fill in where I go awry. Yes, and that has been a source of frustration for me and for our staff as well. I know you've expressed that concern. Immediately after, quickly after the strategic plan was adopted, we sent out an RFP to find qualified experts from outside to help us, as we did with the previous strategic plan. I think it was 2007 strategic plan. In that case, we found consultants that for a fairly reasonable annual cost came in and helped us develop the action steps and measure the implementation guides. This time we went out and the proposals we got back were in the $100,000 range, where we had budgeted, I think, around $30,000 for them. I believe that was all reported out at the time. We rejected those. The intent was to go back out and look for some additional consultants due to other workload items and just the lack of consultants that seem to be doing that work now. The group that we used before was through Sickage. They no longer have their local government division. The original people that were there did a really good job for us. That division has long since, with our compensation study work, they have pretty much eliminated that. They were bringing in out-of-state folks to do it. So it has been a struggle and a problem to find people. We don't have that expertise in-house. We did with our previous assistant city administrator. She went to some training to learn how to facilitate that work for us and not have to use a consultant, but shortly after that, she took a good job over in St. Charles and took that experience and knowledge with her, just due to many other things. The transition, I'm not trying to make excuses, just the facts of life here is the transition time, learning curve, and many other projects, and the lack of qualified consultants out there at a reasonable cost, in our view. We have not gotten that off the ground. You're absolutely right. We're now in 2019, looking back at the 2015 strategic plan. It is likely we will be looking at some kind of an update to that in the next budget year. In fact, I think we have that in the next 2 years, fiscal year 2021, looking at just doing an update to it. So we are losing some of the value of that. We are trying in-house to record the steps. Part of our difficulty here with everything has always been keeping track of what we're doing, make the progress on things, but reporting them out is a whole nother entity. We're trying to get to that point where we can report out the progress we have made and identify the steps that we have made. It won't be the full, robust project task and benchmarking and measurement that we wanted to have originally, but we think we can come up with something that will at least provide you with the information for the council and the public that we have made progress, and the progress can be at least shown, if not measured, as to where we are. And with that, we can give recommendations on things that looked possible in 2015. I'm not going to try to give you examples tonight, but there'll be an exercise we do with staff to see if there's things that these no longer really are relevant, and we'll recommend that they may be set aside or delayed or maybe removed in the future, and it can give the progress, as I said, of the things that we have accomplished. So it would be an in-house measurement activity, but it wouldn't be the full-blown resource, I don't believe, that we'll be able to get to.
Alderman Goodman?
Can I just say that from my perspective, everything you've just said, I have heard from you before, and I understand that when you go out for bid and the cost of the services is too expensive, we can decide not to do something like this. But then we should say, we've decided not to do it. Not just keep putting it, saying, oh, well, we'll put it off, we'll put it off, we'll put it off. Either take the step of saying, we're not doing this, and in which case, doing another strategic plan in a year or two had better be a lot cheaper than it was the first time, because we did not get as much value out of that as we should have, and we spent time and money and consultant costs and volunteer costs and city officials and local volunteer efforts that went towards making that. And so we really need to then reevaluate how worthwhile doing this again soon is, and how much we're really going to get out of it if we cannot find a reasonably priced way of then using that information. And I'm not saying we haven't used the information, and I'm not saying that the strategic plan in 2015 wasn't worth doing. I'm saying we didn't get our full bang for our buck. And I'm all about getting the taxpayers bang for their buck. If we're not, following up, setting ourselves steps, seeing that we're accountable to that plan, seeing that we advance along that set of goals, tracking our progress. Maybe we're making progress, maybe we're not making as much progress as we should be, but either way, we're not being accountable to the public. So saying, well, we're putting this off, isn't being very honest about what we're doing. If we're just not going to do it, we're not going to do it, and we shouldn't have it on here either, even at Tier 3, based on what I'm hearing you say, I think.
City Administrator?
That's something we'll reconsider, whether it should just come off under the current way it's laid out there. That might be a more straightforward way. We need to give some thought to that. Two things I would comment, though, on. I still intend that we will provide at least a documentation of the things that we have achieved. I think that's just something that we can accomplish and should be done. You need to have that it's not that you're not getting it piecemeal, but it needs to be in one place. Much like the accomplishments and the environmental things, we finally were able to take the time to put that together. We had someone on staff that could do it. We just need to list out what progress we made and which goal in one comprehensive list. That's not the measurement and everything the full blown, so perhaps we should remove it. One of the other things for the future, I've spoken with Christina, as we look to a couple years down the road to a new strategic planning effort that may be coming, to include in the request for proposals, one of the requirements in that agreement would be not just to facilitate, I think the current group did an excellent job facilitating the process and the input that we got from the community and all the stakeholders, but require them to be involved with coming up with all the action steps and the measurement criteria. That should be one of their expertise that they bring along. Then we can carry out the actual measurement. That would be separated. It may be a separate contract with them or with someone else. But we stopped short of that this time. We got all the goals and a lot of the objectives were written out under each of the 6 major goals in the strategic plan, but we didn't get the action steps. That was supposed to be a follow-on. That we need to have right up front and just moving right into that stage as soon as we finish with the strategic plan. That's been something that we have learned as staff. If you let that go, we end up in this situation. We were fortunate last time. We had Sikich working with us on some other projects. They were interested. We spoke to several different firms 10 years ago, and Sikich was able to bring in people that were very detailed. The staff spent a lot of time laying out all the action steps. It was a much bigger, broader plan at the time with, I remember almost everything was a high priority. And we said, you know what, everything can't be the highest priority. We've got to rank these things. So we actually were able to break it down with their help. That's what we're missing here. And I agree with you. We haven't done a good job on that end of it, and it's been a real frustration because of the measurement part, but we do have the ability to report out. We need to get that out to you all so you can see, here's all the things that have been accomplished, because many, many things have been accomplished. We just didn't have the process laid out where there was timelines and measurement. Did we get these done on target by the deadlines we laid out, like you would with the construction management project? You don't get a building built or a project done if you don't keep on the timelines. That's a pretty easy example to get your arms around. This is some major accomplishments. We just haven't reported them out in a cohesive way. So I appreciate your input, and constructive criticism is understood. Thank you.
Alderman Davalos?
Thank you. I just want to put one more thing into this. This has been a good discussion, and people have brought up some good things. I personally don't necessarily want a strategic plan without empty spaces in it, a little bit, in theory. Because as I look back to 215, and all that's happened between 215 and now, there's an awful lot of things that occurred or needed to occur that we did not have a clue about when that strategic plan went in. I mean, considering the explosion in TIF 4 in the Southwest District, it's almost mind-boggling. I don't think I knew when that strategic plan was developed that it would take off quite like that, and that it requires a lot of work by staff. And I'm not trying to make an excuse. I'm just trying to say I think we need to leave some spaces. Maybe some things do get put off to another plan, or they do wait. I'm very positive about the environmental tasks that we have done and initiatives we have done and how solar is taking off. And I don't quite think I realized that would happen when the strategic plan was done. I just think any strategic plan is going to shift and move, and things are going to get added in. I don't think I knew, sounds like I didn't know much, but I don't think I knew how the ERP would just suck up staff time. And it's really important, and it's going to make a huge difference. And I'm not using it as an excuse for everything, but I'm trying to be realistic. I think that if we don't make spaces for other priorities to come into that plan, and if we do make space, something's going to have to drop down. So, and it does. I agree with Alderman Goodman that I am thrilled that the website moved up. And so things go around, but I don't think we've done such a poor job considering everything that we didn't know when the plan was first established, and what we know now, I guess I just have to say, I'm personally okay with how this is unrolling and how we've been able to fit in new initiatives. So I just think it's a balance, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, this was a information and a review item. And if you have future input, you're free to contact the city administrator, or it'll be brought up at future meetings to discuss. Our next item, item number 6, review and file the quarterly economic development activity report, is for information only. And if anybody has any questions or comments, we'll review and file those. And then item number 7 is also for informational purposes. And unless there's any questions, we will review and file the commercial space vacancy report. Moving on to item number 8, we will review and file the Community Development Department fiscal year 2019 work program and decision package status report, unless someone has questions or comments they would like to make regarding that item. Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 9, which is to review and file the bi-monthly code enforcement activity report. And unless there's any comments or questions regarding that, we'll move on to the rest of the agenda this evening. There's nothing under miscellaneous, and we have one more motion to take care of. Alderman Goodman?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Good night, everyone. Thank you.